Afternoon's local review body meeting. We have got 4 items to discuss today, and firstly, do we have any apologies for absence?
I do, Chair. I have apologies from Councillors Cunningham and Ireland.
Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest? Provost.
Item 4, that's the extension to enable single level living with access to a ramp and fitting out of a wet flower shower tray adaptation. So if I can declare an interest, and I will leave the chamber at that point, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Provost. First item on the agenda today is number 2024/0053/TP domestic double-storey rear extension. Could I pass you on to Mr. Brand to go through it, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is an application at 6 Padmire Crescent in Ward 5, Newton Mearns South and Eaglesham. The application is for a proposal to alter the front and rear elevations to create a 2-storey extension with a dormer window to the front and also a front gable. There were no objections to this application. I'll now summarise the decision made by the planning case officer. The extension at the back would be 11.6 metres in width, 6 metres in height and 3 metres in projection from the rear elevation. The proposed 2-storey extension would be a large, bulky and significantly increase the size, scale and massing of the dwelling, dominating the rear elevation of the building. Furthermore, the proposed mansard roof would not be sympathetic to the existing dwelling, and the proposed replacement front dormer would significantly increase the size, scale and massing of the front dormer on the roof slope with a low proportion of glazing. Additionally, the proposed 2-storey rear extension would be visible from the public road, and by virtue of its size, it would not be in keeping with other developments within the immediate locality. The reason given for refusal was the proposal is of a size, scale and massing that would dominate the existing building to the detriment of its character. Furthermore, the proposal does not respect local architecture, building form and design, and would result in significant loss of character and visual amenity to the surrounding area. The proposal is therefore poorly designed. The proposal is contrary to National Planning Framework 4 Policies 14 and 16 and Policies D1, D1.1 and D2 of the Local Development Plan. I will now do a quick summary of the appeal. The appellant provided a design summary showing the locations of dwellings with 1.5 or more storey extensions in the immediate vicinity. This document highlighted 8 examples of large extensions built in the last 20 years. It also highlighted local examples of gable roofs and dormers which could be used as a measure of comparison. The statement points out that the dwelling is not in a conservation area or a listed building. The appeal highlighted that the original design was altered following discussion with the case officer, resulting in reduction to the size of a front dormer and replacement of a dormer window with a velux, a simplified front gable, and the width of the rear extension being reduced along with the number of windows. The following points were also raised: that the design keeps 12 metres to the boundaries and does not overlook neighbours. The choice of materials harmonises with the existing building. The proposed dormer is only slightly larger than the existing, and the modern design and materials will improve energy and efficiency. It concludes by saying there is no cohesive style of housing within this neighbourhood. In the event of this review being upheld, the following conditions should be attached to any planning permission thus granted. 1. The development hereby approved must be begun not later than the expiration of 3 years beginning with the date on which permission is granted or, as the case may be, deemed to be granted. The reason to comply with the provisions of Section 58 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 as amended. And secondly, the development shall not commence until details of materials to be used on all external surfaces of the building and hard surfaces have been submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority. Thereafter, the development shall be implemented in accordance with the approved details. A reason to ensure the development is acceptable in appearance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Brand. I'd like to open up to the committee for any comments. Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. We recall the site visit on this, and I think the fundamental question for me was around quantifying this massing. It states in the report of handling on page 17 of the Councillor's papers that there's a 3-metre projection from the property. Now, I think we need to be clear, is that 3 metres from the ridge line of the roof, or is that 3 metres from the wall of the original property? Because that could make quite a material difference. And looking at the scale drawn in page 55, it looks to me as if that's from the ridge line of the roof. I appreciate that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr Brand.
Yeah, I have been able to clarify that by just going back and checking the plans submitted. The projection of 3 metres is from the rear wall of the existing dwelling. I was able to just print off a small, print off a plan over lunch break. It shows that the extension would come out as far as in line with, there was an existing small building at the back, an extension and a utility room, I believe. It would come out in line with that utility room. So that is 3 metres back from the existing wall.
It's at the rear of the building provost, yeah.
Morrison.
Yeah, I'm just looking at page 55, and that is marked as being a 2-scale drawn, where that is approximately 4-metre measurement according to the scale, and it looks at around 1 metre, perhaps 2 metres, following that scale. So yeah, I'm having a wee bit of difficulty with that. So that's the proposed site plan in page 55.
Mr Brand.
I think maybe the easiest way to visualise it is just to think back to the existing small extension at the rear of the property and take a line from the back wall of that, and that would give you a sense of the size of the proposal.
Okay, I appreciate that clarity. Thank you.
Okay, anyone any further comments? Provost.
Yes, just to clarify that extension, if the wall of it, the finishing wall, is going to be in line with that existing, is that 3 metres out from the main building? Is that, it looks as if it's 3 metres out.
What's the page number?
It's 56 I'm looking at in this, but it's that diagram that's just been passed round.
Yeah.
So it's not just coming out 1 metre, it's coming out 3 metres.
Yes.
Is that correct, Mark? Sorry.
Yes, Provost. Yeah, just rereading the case officer's notes. It's 3 metres in projection from a rear elevation. Yeah.
Any further comments? Councillor Lundy.
regarding the size and scale, I'd like to agree with what the case officer says. I think it is poorly designed, and I think that it will look quite large on the back of the building.
Councillor Edlin.
I have to say that I disagree with most of the comments that the case officer made, which I considered, some of which I thought were more subjective than objective. I personally looked at the other houses in the area, looked at what's there before, and I actually think it looks quite an attractive proposal to me in terms of the aesthetics of the whole thing. I would question the situation regarding the trees if the proposal was to leave the trees as they are. But subject to that, I don't share the objections that others have raised over that. I think that I understand what was just discussed before by the other councillors, and I don't think it's material to me, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any notice of the trees, Mr. Brand?
Trees are not mentioned within the either by the case officer as a case of concern or by the applicant within their any sort of like detail.
I think going by the consensus, I'd be prepared to follow the consensus and follow the planner's advice and refuse this one if anyone's otherwise minded.
I'd be prepared to second that, Chair. For me, the litmus test was how far back out from the property this extension was, and that was unclear on the site visit, and it felt to me that if that really was 3 metres and it was coming out as far as the existing extension, but for the majority of the length of the property, then that would have been in accordance with what the planners had said, you know, too much kind of scale and massing. If it was just a 1 metre, 2 metres perhaps, that might have been different. I would have been off a different view, but it's been confirmed that that is indeed the case. It's 3 metres, so for me, I would second that it's upheld. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. Is Councillor Edlin?
Could I abstain from this, please?
Of course you can. I don't think there was a motion put forward, was there?
Yeah, so strictly speaking, Councillor, there's a formal motion presented and seconded. You could put an alternative motion, and if you fail to find a seconder for that, you could ask for your dissent to be recorded. But as no vote's taken place, you can't technically abstain.
Councillor Edlin?
I don't see any point putting a proposal, alternative proposal, which I know won't be seconded, so I'll just go along, I suppose, subject to Chair's advice.
Thanks, Councillor Edlin. So we are going with the advice of the planners and rejecting that motion then.
Yep, so the decision of the local review body in this case is to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and to refuse planning permission for the reasons outlined in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Moving on to the second one, which is reference number 2024/0131/TP. It is downstairs extension to enable single level living with access to a ramp and fit out with a wet floor shower tray adaptation. And I believe, Probus, you're going to leave the meeting now. Could you declare the declaration of interest?
Yes, I'm about to do that now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Provost. I will now pass on to Mr. Brand to go through the outline of the application.
Thank you, Chair. The application is at 70 Ravenscliff Drive, Giffnock. It's in Ward 3, Giffnock and Thornley Bank. There was one objection to the application, which was on the subject of damage to subsidence remediation works at the adjacent property to the rear. I'll now summarise the decision by the planning case officer. The appeal highlights the applicant has health and mobility issues and that the proposed extension will assist the applicant's condition. The case officer notes that the application included 5 letters from medical practitioners with responsibility for the applicant's care, and these detailed the applicant's diagnosis and prognosis. The information contained within these statements was treated as confidential during the determination. The dwelling was previously extended in 2004 with the erection of a 2-storey extension. The proposed extension would extend a further 7.6 metres along the common rear boundary, extending as far as the rear boundary. The proposed extension measures 4 metres wide with a flat roof. It stands 3.5 metres high. A boundary hedge would be removed. The scheme also includes an access ramp. Combined with the existing rear extension, the proposal would result in a continuous wall running along the common boundary for a distance of approximately 12 metres and at a minimum height of 3.5 metres. This would create a dominant and overbearing visual impact to the detriment of the amenity of the adjacent property, number 72. There would also be a significant loss of garden ground from approximately 50 square metres to approximately 24 square metres. This would represent an overdevelopment of an already constrained site to the detriment of the amenity of the occupants of the dwelling. The applicant's particular mobility requirements and personal health, as explained in the confidential statement in support of the application, are material considerations, and the letters from the medical professionals carefully considered. However, in this case, it is found that on balance, the applicant's circumstances do not outweigh the terms of the development plan. The reasons given for refusal are: the proposal is contrary to policies 14 and 16 of National Planning Framework 4 and contrary to policies D1 and D1.1 of Local Development Plan 2, because the proposed single-storey extension, in conjunction with the existing 2-storey extension, would have an unacceptable, dominant and overbearing visual impact when viewed from the adjacent building to the west, to the detriment of the amenity of the occupants of the adjacent building, given its height and length in proximity to the common rear boundary. And secondly, the proposed single-storey extension with access ramp, in conjunction with the existing 2-storey rear extension, would give rise to the overdevelopment of the site to the detriment of the residential amenity of the occupants of the dwelling, given the size of its footprint. And, there's a third reason. The proposal is contrary to the terms of the non-statutory planning guidance, Householder Design Guide, because the proposed extension extends more than 4 metres along the common rear boundary, and secondly, proposed extension and access ramp would give rise to overdevelopment of the site. I'll now summarise the case for the appeal. The policies of National Planning Framework 4 and LDP 2 are open to a degree of interpretation by the planning officer, who should have regard to the specifics of each individual application. Policies must be interpreted to address the application in question. In this case, no such interpretation has been applied and no allowance made for the medical condition. The medical reports provide a detailed assessment of the applicant's progressive condition, which will continue to reduce the applicant's mobility. Currently, the applicant has to sleep in the lounge. The proposal was intended to ease some of the suffering by constructing an accessible living space on one level, offering the privacy to be able to carry out personal care needs with access to a bathroom. The case officer has not properly considered the medical assessment in the determination. The assessment has focused almost exclusively on the impact the new structure would have on the adjoining neighbour. The issue at the heart of this application is the welfare of the applicant, the owner, and providing some quality of life which would otherwise be denied. It is in such circumstances that the planning process has to be flexible and responsive, and if that means that certain requirements have to be modified, that should be perfectly acceptable. In the event of this review being upheld, the following conditions should be attached to any planning permission thus granted. Firstly, the development hereby approved must be begun not later than the expiration of 3 years beginning with the date in which permission is granted, or, as the case may be, deemed to be granted. And the reason is to comply with the provisions of the Section 58 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997. And secondly, before development commences, a report on the ground conditions within the development site should be submitted to the Planning Authority for approval. The reason, to ensure the ground is not subject to subsidence, and if required, relevant measures are taken to prevent subsidence of any future building. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Brand. Can we pass it over to the committee for any comments, please? Councillor Lundy.
Thank you. I think we were all a bit concerned about the outside space that would be left after the extension, but I think it's worth noting that the applicants obviously decided that this is what's required for their situation. I think that what Mark said about the conditions that need to be met has put my mind slightly more at ease regarding the subsidence, which was the concern of the neighbour. And the neighbour's objection actually didn't mention the fact of the mass and scale and size of it, so I think we should consider obviously the potential benefits that it could have for the welfare of the applicant, whilst also bearing in mind that planning are going to look at the issues that the neighbour has with the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Edlin.
I'm also pleased to. I have given this quite a bit of thought. I did notice that if this proposal goes through, this building will be bigger in size at the rear compared to the 5 houses adjacent on either side. I am swayed by the health of the applicant. However, he's going to be disrupted when the building is going on anyway, and there's nothing to stop him from solving his problems by moving house to another appropriate property that would accommodate his health issues. And I am, after thinking about it quite a lot, the issue of the disproportionate size of the rear of the house compared to the other houses is one that slightly concerns me. So I, on balance, think that outweighs the health issues in this case.
Thank you, Councillor Edlin. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Brand stated there, as the independent officer, that the medical assessment was not considered, but I believe it is within, I'm not sure if it's the National Planning Framework 4 or our own local development plan, that there is a schedule on considering medical adaptations. Is that the case?
Mr Brand.
Within Policy 16 of National Planning Framework 4, there is a policy for household development which is generally supportive of development which is required, or household of, I shall just read it out in full actually rather than trying to paraphrase. This is from National Planning Framework 4, Policy 16H. Household development proposals that provide adaptations in response to risks from a changing climate or relating to people with health conditions that lead to a particular accommodation needs will be supported. Now that's one policy within many within National Planning Framework 4, which should be read as a whole.
Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, it is actually quite a short piece of narrative, really, isn't it, within Policy 16. I mean, I find myself in agreement with Councillor Edlund's remarks regarding the loss of outdoor space, but there's also a part of me that thinks that, you know, neither neighbouring property has actually raised a complaint. The only representation received is from the property across the back from regarding subsidence. So in that case, I would be minded to overturn the planner's refusal, but with a condition that a sufficient engineer's report be provided to demonstrate that, you know, whatever technical challenge is posed by the development in terms of subsidence or flooding is appropriately dealt with by the development. I think that should be feasible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. I think that could be accommodated, couldn't it, Mr. Brand?
There was a condition, sort of a suggested condition there. Do you want to just go over that again, or just sort of the condition would be before development commences, a report on the ground conditions within the development site should be submitted to the planning authority for approval. The reason being to ensure the ground is not subject to subsidence, and if required, relevant measures are taken to prevent subsidence of any future building. So what this planning condition would be is really just to, and it's due diligence as much as anything else, check that the ground is solid for building. But should there be any issues with the ground, because there has been remediation work done, that the relevant engineering solutions are implemented on that site, as there are many ways of building on grounds with subsidence. It's just due diligence and sort of doing the right thing to make sure that any building that might be there is properly constructed.
Just to clarify, Chair, I think that wording from Mr. Brand sounds sufficient.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. I think I feel the same as Councillor Lundy and Councillor Morrison, and I think the factors outweigh the refusal for planning application to overturn it. Would you like to propose it? A motion, Councillor Lundy?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to propose to overturn the planning decision.
Give a second, and Councillor Morrison second. So the decision of the committee is we overturn the decision of the planners and pass this.
So yeah, the decision is to overturn the appointed officer's decision in this case, to grant planning permission subject to the conditions as per what Mark said earlier, and we'll go forward with that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that. We're just going to get Provost back, and I'll go through the next one. It's item 5 on the agenda. When she comes back in, it should be 2 seconds. Welcome back, Provost. On to item number 5, which is reference number 2024/0077/TP, which is proposed 2-storey re-extension and associated internal alterations to existing dwelling house. Could I pass on to Mr. Brand for some further comment, please?
Thank you, Chair. The application is at Treeside Cottage, Ayr Road, Newton Mearns. It's in Ward 5, Newton Mearns South and Osham. There were no objections to this application. The proposal is for a 3-storey rear extension, including upper floor balcony, decking and alterations to the side extension of dwelling house. I'll now summarise the decision of the planning case officer. The proposal would not give rise to additional overlooking, overshadowing or loss of daylight to any neighbouring dwellings. The house to plot ratio of the proposed curtilage and the size of the garden area raises no significant conflicts with policies D1.2 and D6 of LDP2. The cottage itself has traditional proportions, design and a traditional pitch roof and windows. The existing flat-roofed extension is smaller in its scale than the donor building and does not dominate the existing building. The proposed pseudo-modernist 3-storey extension with its flat roofs and horizontal emphasis is considered to be at odds with the traditional style of the existing dwelling. The contrasting style, size and scale are considered to dominate and overwhelm the traditional character of the dwelling. The reason for refusal is the proposal is contrary to policies 14 and 16 of National Planning Framework 4 and policies D1 and D1.1 of Local Development Plan 2, because the proposed 3-storey extension would dominate and overwhelm the character and design of the existing building and would be detrimental to its visual amenity given its scale and contrasting design. I now summarise the statement of appeal. The applicant insists that the extension is a 2-storey extension where the lower floor is accessed from the ground of the existing cottage. The proposal is not a 3-storey extension. The sloping nature of the ground creates a void beneath the lower floor. Original plans to use the space as a granny flat were deleted following discussion with the case officer. The applicant also notes that they purchased the site with detailed permission for 4 houses, but have chosen to submit a new application which uses new technologies to design a house which would be almost maintenance free, fabricated off site to ensure speed and quality of build, capable of generating its own power, heating and cooling. The appeal also refutes that the character and design of the existing cottage would be negatively affected. The new extension will be 770 centimetres lower than the roof line and lower than the existing extension and would therefore not dominate the existing dwelling. The existing extension is ugly, impossible to heat efficiently and detracts from the beauty of the original Treeside Cottage. The proposed design is in line with the directives of Historic Scotland, with clear definition between the parts which are 19th century and parts which are 21st century. It uses the concept of assertive contrast. This means affirmation of the new as a more or less equal partner to the old. New and old combined should be of greater lasting value than either on its own. The extension cannot be seen when viewed from the front. The extension can be viewed from the east side only, but only from within the private garden. The building cannot be seen from Ayr Road or Mallochurch Road. The applicant suggests that the proposal could have been considered under permitted development. However, the case officer's view is that this is not the case and that the development is actually closer than 10 metres to the boundary, which would not permit it to be considered under permitted development. So I would just ask the board members to be aware of that fact. In the event of this review being upheld, the following conditions should be attached to any planning permission thus granted. The development hereby approved must be begun not later than the expiration of 3 years, beginning with the date on which the permission is granted, or, as the case may be, deemed to be granted, for reason to comply with the provisions of Section 58 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997. And secondly, the development shall not commence until a plan showing the location of all trees to be retained indefinitely is submitted and approved in writing by the planning authority. Reason, to ensure the building cannot be seen from Mallockshire Road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Brand. Could I open up to the committee for any comments, please? Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr Brand, for the presentation also. This was the second site from today's site visits, and yeah, it was a bit of a jungle going round. It's called a property which has been vacant for quite some time. What struck me is, I've been driving up and down that road for years and I didn't even know that that cottage was in that location until we were going there for a site visit today, which I think really speaks to how much occlusion there is from the tree cover. And I welcome the fact that if this was approved today, that there would be, you know, a condition attached that, you know, we were looking to ensure that the trees were retained. Obviously, in terms of what's proposed here, it does look very different to what's in situ at present. I think it's good that the front facade would be retained, and that is a kind of nod towards the history of the properties in their road. But actually, the kind of more modern aspect to the rear faces a very kind of recently built new build estate, which is not totally incongruous to what's proposed. And I suppose the final consideration I've thrown at the mix, Chair, is Policy 19 of National Planning Framework 4 refers to heating and cooling, and you know, the fact that these are drains on energy, these are impacts on the environment, and it seems from the papers here that this property is looking at some new innovative ways of providing that power and that heat and light. But it naturally follows that that couldn't be achieved with a style of construction which is perhaps more symbolic of the past. So I think you can't have it both ways. We either apply the standards of the new National Planning Framework and accept that may mean there's a difference in architecture. So that's just my thoughts. I look forward to hearing what colleagues have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. Councillor Edlin.
I agree with what Councillor Morrison just said. In actual fact, I'm just looking at the picture here of the rear of the property, which is where most of the construction is being done. And it's, at the moment, in my opinion, the current state of the design that was approved, the original extension that is there, is particularly unattractive as it stands. And looking at these plans, I find the proposal quite attractive because it provides a functional result with the shielding of the trees, and it fits in quite nicely with the new buildings beyond at that side of the house. And the front of the house is being quite considerately done. I think the trees, the position of the trees is quite integral to this application. And but subject to that, I agree with what Councillor Andrew Morrison has said, and I think, to me, looking at the design and the plans that were shown to us, it's quite an attractive proposal. Subject to me, I was quite surprised that I survived the trek round the house and all the undulations of the ground. I thought I was going to break something in the way, but anyway, I've survived it. And I think when it's completed, this will be a very attractive building, actually.
Thank you, Councillor Edlin. Anyone else like to? Provost?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, it's certainly in need of something being done. I'm just a wee bit concerned about what is being proposed. Is like the front still maintains the traditional look of it and the materials there in the building, and that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned, and the local community to maintain that kind of thing. And when you go round the back through this, you know, what's being proposed, it's like moving into a different era. So by all means, I can appreciate the owners wanting to extend and do something different with it. It just seems just too much in a different era, and it doesn't blend. And I'm looking at the reasons for refusal, and I can't help but agree that it would dominate and overwhelm the character and design of the existing dwelling. And it's just a shame that they went for it seemed to be ultra modern to add to that building. So I can appreciate the reasoning why they want to do it, but I'm just disappointed that that's the proposal. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Lundy.
I tend to agree with Provost Montague on the point that it's almost like one house attached to another one, a completely different house, a different property. And I have a bit of concern that when the shrubbery and all that is taken back at the backyard, the driveway entrance, that it will be seen from the new estate at the back, and there's also a pathway that goes right alongside the property. So I have a couple of concerns about the way that it's proposed at the moment, and I'm not sure whether it could be maybe less extreme in its proposals in terms of how modern that is.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got a few comments to make. I think I quite agree when they're keeping the front of the facade, which looks great, but it's now a combination of old and new, which I find quite appealing, and they're also putting the kind of green aspects into it quite heavily. And I've heard Mr Brand say that there was a previous application in for 4 houses there, which has been now tailored down to 1. But on page 168 it states it is proposed to apply for permission to erect a further 3 detached properties at a similar design aesthetic, and will be part of an additional application for planning in principle on page 168. That's not part of this planning application, so we can't really bear that into any effect. It's a kind of difficult one, this, because I do quite agree with it, that I think it looks quite nice, I think it looks quite futuristic, and I get Provost's point on it, and I also get other points on it. But I think, in all honesty, I think I would probably reject it on the planners and what they've and the reasons laid out earlier. So, does anybody have otherwise want to put another motion forward?
I would move that the decision is overturned for the reasons aforementioned earlier.
Is there a seconder? Yes, Councillor Edlin. And we have...
Could I second your proposal? I mean, it's just a shame. It looks fabulous, but it's just in the wrong building. Thanks. I'll second your proposal, Chair.
Could we have a vote on this then?
Yes, certainly we'll move to the vote. So the proposal before us is the motion by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Edlin, to overturn the appointed officer's decision and grant permission based on the conditions outlined by Mark earlier. As an amendment, we have a proposal by Councillor McLean, seconded by Provost Montague, to uphold the appointed officer's decision and to refuse planning permission. Could I please have a show of hands for Councillor Morrison's motion, please? I see 2 hands. And now for Councillor McLean's amendment. And that is 3 votes, therefore the amendment is carried and the appointed officer's decision is upheld in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. Item number 6, I have to leave now because I wasn't involved in the original one. So I'll pass over to Mr. Buck.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. So, as the Chair has had to leave, as he wasn't part of the previous discussions in this matter. I'll now propose we move to an appointment of chair. Do members present have any proposals as to who should chair the meeting? Provost Montague, please.
Thank you. This committee agreed to do the adult thing and just rotate the chair, and I just want to check that Councillor Lundy's had a shot of being the chair, and if not, it's his turn, but if he has had a shot of it, then it's Councillor Edlin's shot.
Well, who chaired the last time we considered this?
Annette.
Ah,
Yeah.
So if
I'm quite happy to do it.
have you not done it yet?
I have had a chance.
Oh no, if you've had your chance, then it's back to Councillor Edlin again. So I would propose Councillor Edlin.
yeah, fine. Second that.
Do we have any other proposals?
Thank you very much, Provost. I'm quite underwhelmed by all this. Can I say,
I'll ask you to assume the chair, but you can remain where you are if you wish. Or...
is it okay with you if I sit here? It just saves me making the effort. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so, okay, oh, it's a paper, sorry. This is review of case 2024/07, domestic double-storey rear extension, which...
Excuse me, Chair, that's not the item under consideration. Sorry, if you turn the papers over.
Oh.
It's the head on the back there. That's the one.
This one here?
Yep, the final item.
Item 6. Replacement of a rear single-storey extension with compliant flat and pitched roof and extended rear dormer at 68 Montgomery Street, Eaglesham, G76, 0AU reference number 2024/0059/TP. Report by Director of Business Operations and Partnership, page 171 to 224. Now, this has been considered before. And I think before we consider further, John, could you read out the minute of the last consideration of this case for us, please?
I don't happen to have that with me, Chair. I could get that. Essentially, the only difference in terms of this case is that there were comments submitted related to a reporter's decision in terms of consent. I'm sure Mr Brand could clarify, but those are now attached to your papers alongside the comments made by the applicant regarding that consent.
Right. I'm assuming, without looking at the minute, that we did not make any decision, but we did discuss it, as I remember.
That's correct, Chair. The decision of the committee was to continue and defer the item to a future meeting, and that allowed those comments to be considered that are referred to.
Okay, and there's the report of the reporter, which we've all seen now, I presume. I think we'll just move on to Councillor... Mr Brand, do you want to comment first, please?
If you'd just like me to run through just very briefly the background as to why we sort of like brought this, carried this on from last time. There was, just to refresh you, there were two applications. The planning application, which is the subject for this appeal today, but because the building was in the conservation area and was a listed building, there was also a listed building consent, which was refused. The process for appealing a listed building consent is to the government's reporter. At the time in last August, the report came back in June. There wasn't sufficient time between that report coming back and allowing both yourselves to see the report, but also allowing the applicant time to respond to the reporter's decision. So at this meeting, you both had an opportunity to see it yourselves, but also the applicant themselves had provided a further submission on the basis of the reporter's decision and report.
Thank you. Mr Brand, before we continue, could you give me your professional comments on the reporter's comments, please? I don't know if I can be. I can be professionally advised if it's not in order for me to ask this, because I found reading the report and then reading the conclusions, I found the two did not follow logically. The second did not follow from the first logically, as I saw it. So could you give me your professional judgment on the report, please?
I have a copy of the reporters, or at least a summary of the reporter's decision here. The reporter's decision, the reporter made a number of points. Firstly, I would say that the proposal would not have an impact on the conservation area because it cannot be seen from the street, and that their decision was really based on the size of the extension, how much of the roofscape it would take up, and they came to the conclusion that the scale of the dormer proposal along the rear roofscape was such that it would it would not preserve or enhance the character of the listed building. So that was their reason for refusing the appeal. But it was, I think it's important to say, it wasn't on the character and appearance of the Eaglesham Conservation Area, it was on the negative impact of the cottage itself.
I find it difficult to follow the logic on that, but however, I will accept it as I have to. I'm going to go for comments, so if it's okay, can I move on to comments and call you first, Provost?
Thank you very much. No, it was just at the last meeting we didn't get to the stage of the usual presentation from Mr. Brand, because at the start of the consideration of the item we were asked, were we satisfied we had all the information, and I proposed, and that was agreed by everybody, that we didn't. So I wonder if we could have the usual presentation from Mr. Brand, you know, to set the scene and remind us what the arguments were for and against.
I have to apologise. You're right. I was basing my comments there on what Mr. Brand said at the site visit. From what I recall was said at the site visit, which was not part of the official presentation. I think it was a... I don't know if the site visit is an official part of the presentation or not, of the original visit, but anyway, if you'd like to repeat these comments, Mr.
Absolutely,
Brand,
sure. Yep. I'll now summarise the case officer's assessment. The existing building is B listed and within the Eaglesham Conservation Area. The application is a revised design of application 2023/562 TP, which was approved in January 2024. This revised application increases the width, height and depth of the rear dormer and introduces 3 Juliet balconies and glass doors. It changes the height, pitch and design of the roof to the extension. The enlarged dormer design would cover 75% of the rear roof plane. The dormer in the approved application covered only 50% of the roof plane. This, in the opinion of the case officer, retains sufficient legibility of the underlying character of the cottage. The revised design includes non-traditional double glazed doors and Juliet balconies, which would further erode the property's historic character and increase the possibility of overlooking neighbourhood properties because the windows are located forward of the original roof plane. The reasons for refusal given are the proposal is contrary to Policy 7 of National Planning Framework 4 and Policies D14, 15 and 16 of LDP2 because the proposed development fails to preserve the existing historical and architectural character of a B-listed cottage by introducing a dormer extension that is out of scale to the detriment of the listed building within the Eaglesham Conservation Area. Second reason for refusal is the proposal is contrary to Policy 16 of National Planning Framework 4, as the proposed development will have a detrimental impact on the privacy and amenity of the neighbouring properties due to the introduction of 3 separate double-glazed upper floor doors with Juliet balconies. And thirdly, the proposal is contrary to policies D1 and D1.1 of the adopted Local Development Plan 2, as the proposed development will result in detrimental impact on the existing character of a property, as it is of a scale and massing that is not in keeping with the existing single-storey cottage. I'll now summarise the statement of appeal. These are responses given by the appellant in reply to the reporter's decision. The appellant highlights that the reporter notes that the extension is at the rear and not visible from the street, and will therefore not impact on the setting of the conservation area. Secondly, previous works to the rear of the house have already resulted in the loss of historical character. It would be wrong, therefore, to say that the new proposals will impact on the historical character, because this has already been lost. Thirdly, in response to the reporter's view that the double doors and Juliet balconies are not typical of traditional buildings, the applicant points out that none of the existing features at the rear of a building are in keeping with the original building. Fourthly, in response to the reporter dismissing the appeal on the grounds that the proposal would fail to preserve the listed building, the applicant points out that the previous application was approved and the decision hinges on the slightly increased left-hand dormer, which would take up an insignificant 3.5 square metres of roofscape. In the event of the review being upheld for proposal, the following conditions should be attached to any planning permission thus granted. The development hereby must be begun not later than the expiration of 3 years beginning with the date on which the permission is granted, or as the case may be deemed to be granted, to comply with the provisions of Section 58 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997. Second condition, development shall not commence until details of all materials to be used on external surfaces of a building and hard surfaces have been submitted and approved in writing by the planning authority. Reason to ensure the development is acceptable in appearance. And the third and final condition is that notwithstanding the details shown on the approved plan P/500B, development shall not commence until details of a voltaic solar panels located on the rear extension roof have been submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority. Reason in the interest of visual amenity and to ensure that the proposals do not adversely affect the architectural and historic character of a building. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. I think we'll take Councillor Morrison first, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do recall the discussions around this proposal from the last time, and the decision to not consider it further was based on the Scottish Government Reporter's report, and I think now that we have that report, we should take cognizance of what it says. In terms of the appellant's response to the reporter's communication, there seems to be really kind of 2 main points of objection. The first, that the previous works to the property eroded its character, but I don't think that's necessarily a basis to go ahead and make it worse, to take away even more aspects of its character. And the second aspect that the appellant's raised is that, you know, it's not visible from the streetscape, but my understanding is if a building's listed, all of the building is listed, not just the parts that's visible from the street. So on those 2 bases, I would refute the appellant's response to the reporter, and I'm of a view that we uphold the planner's decision. Thank you.
Provost?
Thank you very much, Chair. Oh, I've got the news up on my screen there. It's page 186 that I'm paying attention to just now. Councillor Morrison has dealt with the response to the reporter's comments, but this says, and we were told this at the time, that it should be noted that the changed elements being considered in this application are essentially the reintroduction of the various design elements that had been removed by the applicant previously, following discussions because they were deemed unacceptable. So if they were unacceptable then, why do they think that it's acceptable now, is one point. And then the next paragraph, it talks about the compromising the integrity and legibility of the historic and architectural character of the B-listed cottage, while still allowing the cottage to become a viable property for future generations. And that's really important as well about our local historical architecture. And also the report says it was made clear to the applicant during these discussions, and no further pre-application discussions took place between the applicant and the planning authority since this approval, even though it's been indicated on the application form. So, therefore considered that no further meaningful discussions could take place over these same points that had not already been extensively discussed, and therefore no intervening change in planning policy. The position of the planning authority remains the same. And I have to agree with that. It just seems that that part of it was deemed not acceptable, and having got planning permission previously, they've now come in with the bit that was unacceptable then. So I would agree with Councillor Morrison to uphold the planning officer's decision.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Lundy?
Yeah, I think I would agree with the comments that have been said with regards to the original planning permission being approved, and the appellant seems to be using that approval in terms of the response to the reporter, but we're talking about two different applications really in that respect.
Okay, thank you. I have to say that I've read the reporter's report in some detail, and I don't follow the conclusions he reaches given his comments before that. I also note, I think the building has had extensions before, and we're talking about an area at the back of the property which does not affect the vision or the view at the front of the property, which is the character of the village of Eaglesham. However, I have noted that what my colleagues have said, and I don't want to dissent from their decision on this matter. So I just want to make these comments on what I've noted from the report. I think we should now, if somebody would like to propose acceptance of the report or otherwise, please.
Chair, I'd be happy to move that we uphold the planner's decision.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Seconded by the Provost. Is anybody dissenting on this? No. So, motion is carried. Okay.
Therefore, the decision of the local review body is that the appointed officer's decision be upheld in this case, and planning permission refused.
Is there any other competent business today? Do we have a date of the next meeting, Mr. Burke?
You put me on the spot now, Chair. I can get back to members with that, but
okay,
I believe next year's meetings are out, and there is also a special meeting of the Planning Applications Committee which has been arranged, but I've already contacted you all about that.
Is there no further routine meetings this year?
I believe there is one in November, but I might be wrong. I'd have
okay, that's fine. Okay, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. It's just okay. I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you everybody for your significant contributions today.